If you want to see the true measure of a man, watch how he treats his inferiors, not his equals. Does Reddit agree with this quote? I think a lot of people are wasting effort reading far too deeply into the question, picking at semantics, etc. It's not a perfect question, but with a little bit of thinking it should not be hard to understand its intent. Essentially, put someone in a social situation with a clearly defined social hierarchy, and see if that person acts like a douchebag. I would not think highly of such a person. Perfectly worded. I award you winner of Reddit for the evening. Thank you for being intelligent. Character stuff aside, there are practical reasons for being kind to inferiors. That's meant in the strict hierarchical sense. I'm a lawyer and have worked in some big firms. I have to give projects to others and spread things around. I make sure I give good instructions, don't drop a mess on someone, have stuff organized, and do the little things that make their job easier. The result is that everyone does great work for me. If someone screws up, I always turn it around to my fault for unclear instructions, etc. and don't rat them out as superiors. I did make a secretary cry once. I gave her something to type up and told her that if she was too swamped with other stuff by 4 PM or so, let me know and I'll type it. She got a little weepy because no one else there treated her that way. She helped me out so many times after that and we got along great. I'm not being cynical here. I do like people, but being nice, not getting angry over mistakes, and taking some interest in people, I know the names of their kids and pets, is hugely beneficial. And waitstaff is always to be treated well, in addition to tipping well and not being an butt. Give out compliments and tell the management. Nothing big, just mention to a manager that your waitstaff is really good. I know the owner of a bar I frequent. When I talk to her, I always slip in a nice comment about the bartenders and staff. They are good, and I've had quite a few free drinks. You are someone I would work for. First date. Took a girl home straight after dinner. She asked me what was wrong. She seemed to think that there was no problem talking to the waitress like she was an idiot without any respect and then being rude again when the waitress tried to win her over with kindness. You should have went back and asked the waitress for a date, if she was your type. I got to see a great example of the dichotomy of this lately when I was doing a surgery observation. Anyway, the first surgeon was doing a relatively simple procedure. He was friendly with all the staff and with the surgical techs handing him his tools and equipment. If they happened to be a little slow he would ask them politely but assertively for what was needed and the whole surgery went by without a hitch. So the first surgeon finished his procedure, and the second surgeon came in. Looking back, I could just feel that the entire warm friendly energy of the room was sucked out on his arrival. He was a total butthole to his techs. He kept saying crap like "you're on thin ice" or "I'm going to fire you." It was stressful for me, and I wasn't even freaking doing anything. Anyway, I have no clue why a surgeon would act like this because your surgical techs really make or break your surgeries. He relied on them as team members, but apparently his status went to his head or something. The dude was a total tyrant. Then blood sprayed at me. The end. That's why I always take potential business associates to lunch. No quicker way to see how they regard the world than to watch them interact with the server. Note that equals and inferiors is an inflammatory and transitory designation. But if you're making tips keeping my coffee full, our relationship is pretty clear cut at the moment. Read a great article on that once by a CEO. That was his final test on hiring people. If they met all other qualifications, how they treated the wait staff and boss people were the tiebreaker. I think it's awesome. I once went out to dinner with, among other friends, a guy I had known in grade school. He made a pretty mean comment about our waitress while she was nearby, and I gave him the LA. Dude, she's right there. He was already in dong territory, but his response put it over the top. Who cares? She's just a waitress. I had no more need to reconnect with that douche. The irony is that she almost certainly wasn't just a waitress. She was probably a student or a mom or something besides what she does, but the douche was just a real estate agent. Really, that's it. Maybe he was a sports fan too. Big ups. Textbook making oneself feel better by stepping on others. I broke up with a man because of the way he treated waiters wherever we ate. He was rude, brusque, and generally acted like an imperious butthole, and I was embarrassed to be out with him. I don't know about how much his actions showed his true, complete measure, but they did show me how he felt about people he deemed not worth his time or effort. It put me off a lot. If you treat random people you meet poorly, you are my inferior. I will expect you to try to stab me in the back in the future and I will treat you accordingly. For the record, I'm polite to waitstaff and random people, but you should still expect me to stab you in the back. I do not agree with the quote. I used to, and I think it can be a good measure for some people in some cases, but in the last few years I have met quite a few extremely charming, charismatic individuals who have proved to me that this is not a true measure of a person. Each of these people will treat waitstaff with the highest level of respect. They will charm everyone they deal with, not because they are kind, but because they are smart. They get the best service, they get the best tables, the best deals, the best everything, and everyone thinks they are spectacular human beings. They do it for exactly those reasons. They know how they affect people and they use it however will benefit them most. But if you get to know them well and hear some of their personal beliefs and opinions, you realize that they are despicable, heartless, evil people. Every social situation is a performance. I partially agree with this quote. If you treat inferiors well, it does not guarantee that you are a good person. However, I haven't seen a single person who was rude to the waitstaff et al. Who wasn't also a jerk in some other area of life. The true measure of a man is judged by how he treats someone that can do him absolutely no good. Samuel Johnson FTFY. This changes the context to be recognized as not inferior or superior, but rather whether you stand to benefit anything from the relationship. There's a similar quote where the measure of a man is how he treats those from which he has nothing to gain from, which I do think is insightful, because even some jerks will be nice to servers because they know they'll get their beer faster. But I would not be friends with someone who was rude to perfect strangers, or someone who mistreated animals, etc. I agree it's a great measure of a man, but it is not the only measure. It is vital, but just because a man treats his inferiors well, does not mean he is a great man. Live with a man 40 years, share his house, his meals, speak on every subject, then tie him up, and hold him over the volcano's edge. And on that day, you will finally meet the man. Shan Yu. Most of Reddit will agree that you should treat people well. Most of Reddit will then make fun of Sarah Palin's children. C'est la vie. Actually, no, this will not give you the full measure of a person. It might be enough for your own survey on the topic, but at best this applies in a limited situation. For example, I would say that I don't regularly deal with people that are my economic inferiors, so you would have a hard time gauging that off me. Also, I try not to label things in terms of inferior superior in the first place. There is also the issue of this being a very Western type of value question, right or wrong. Other cultures have different opinions of how to treat one's lessers, and thus you could wind up seriously misjudging someone on cultural bias. I prefer the quote that goes something like, if you want to take the measure of a man, see how he treats someone that can be of no benefit to him. A good interview question is, have you ever had to work with someone who just couldn't cut it, made a lot of mistakes, etc. You will learn a lot about the person with the answer. 6+ years in the food service industry. Yep. Especially true about doctors and med students. My job is located in a huge medical center. Fools always look up for power. People above you, they never want to share power with you. Why you look to them? They give you nothing. People below you, you give them hope, you give them respect, they give you power. Cause they don't think they have any, so they don't mind giving it up. Being OSC. I will avoid dating women who are rude to a server just because they can. I just don't see the world that way, and I would hate to move forward with someone who did. Further to my stereotype, the women who treat the servers like crap usually don't have very good jobs. Yes, this is very true. In my mind it kind of goes along with the quote about taking the measure of a society by how it treats its prisoners. US is so fricked. Our prisons have way too many taxpayer bought luxuries. This is a great quote by Sirius Black. but not even he lives up to his own ideal. Look at how he treats Creature in the books. Miserably. Not to mention Snape when they were kids. Snape was poor, alone, and poorly groomed, and Sirius totally had a superiority complex and treated Snivellus like crud. I'd say it has a very strong military hierarchical basis, valid for in the workplace or in the field, where your interpersonal interactions are going to be on a merit competency respect basis, with interdependence upon one another, and the application of authority. It's also very relative. Say you're an officer and co-boss who needs to complete a goal objective. If you know the best way to do that is to lay down aggressive authority which in turn alienates your underlings but drives them together to complete the goal, you win. Alternatively, you can be the kind of nice guy officer boss whose men love him, and who he treats like his own children, but who might not be the most motivated or effective group, and objectives go unachieved. Who is to say? I think a clearer representation would be how such a man perceives others he is not immediately associated with. There's a thread out there on how people act poorly to others in the food service industry. It stems from a perception of superiority. How someone treats a perceived underling is secondary to the fact that they consider that person inferior. I have been in this situation before, and reflect upon the following quote, "This is the final test of a gentleman. His respect for those who can be of no possible value to him, William Leon Phelps." If you want to see the true measure of a man, watch everything he does, all the time. Anything less will have some measure of inaccuracy or generalization. Very insightful. There are no inferiors. People who treat others as inferior to them are either spoiled and entitled, or they have such low self-esteem that they need to feel better by trampling on others. A woman who believes she is superior to others acts just like a man who believes he is superior to others. As a professor, I refuse to collaborate or conduct research with other professors who treat their students as subhuman. Side note, if you want your students to learn, treat them like the adults they're striving to become. False. There are those who treat their inferiors nicely, not a threat, their equals as competition, threats, and look up to their superiors, potential powerful ally or role model. Don't confuse these people with those who are nice to their inferiors. My brother is like this. He thinks anybody without a university degree is lesser than him. It pisses me off. He never is rude to people but talks about them behind their back, and he treats me like crap even though I am only 16. This is how I judge people and how I choose my friends. But I know this is not how the world works, and that if the measure of a man can be taken, it has no bearing on his success in life. This is related to the concept of karma, that those who rise to the top are those who are noble and pure and true, and that karma pays them back with tremendous success and power and prestige. History tells us this is not true. History tells us that the majority of people who have held power have been hideously evil. History tells us that those who rule treat their underlings like property, and yet they ruled, often to the very end of their lives. This world is freaking ugly, and so the measure of a man, like his virtue, means nothing. I went to a restaurant recently with a group of business contacts. Some of them were extremely rude to the waiter. As someone who is never rude, it was pretty embarrassing. So, I lost their contact details. I just don't want to work with such people. I am a firm believer that everyone is equal in value even if they are not equal in station. How I express this belief is through treating my fellow man as my brother when I can and trying to uplift them when I can. I don't believe in handouts or welfare. To me it's about being there to give them a leg up and get them back on their feet, with the understanding that someday I or someone I care about may need the same, and the hope they will be there to help. I employ 5 people. I disagree with the quote, as I do not believe them to be my inferiors. They work for me in exchange for money, and I profit off their hard work. My job is to make them as productive as possible and ensure they are able to work effectively. Beyond that, I actually like them. We have rules, such as no one makes a cup of tea just for themselves, and I stick to it. If I make myself tea, I have to make one for everyone else. If you want to see the true measure of anyone, watch whether they treat anyone as inferior. That I'd agree with. Once you decide someone is inferior, whether you treat them nicely is just whether you're choosing to humor them. Honestly, it's impossible to see the true measure of a person with any arbitrary circumstance. If I'm any indicator, I treat people with a measure of respect, like humans. If they prove themselves to be idiots, they lose that meager respect. If they prove themselves to be my equal or superior, my respect grows. A waiter will get a firm handshake or looked in the eye. A contractor that doesn't know what LDAP is when they're hired to rebuild our domain gets short, terse statements and shooed away. What would be a case for a woman who believes she is superior to others? How would she act? Contradictory chauvinism. All women act as if they are superior to everyone. Contradictory chauvinism. It comes down to how they handle power in this test. When you have power over someone, do you exert it with grace and kindness, or brutal cruelty? I have been in this situation before, and reflect upon the following quote. This is the final test of a gentleman, his respect for those who can be of no possible value to him. William Leon Phelps. If a person treats his inferior with disrespect, he is my inferior, and I will treat my inferior with respect so that he may once again become my equal. I worked for a guy that acted like super upstanding gentleman around other professionals, but more often than not, when he encountered a taxi driver or waitress, he'd engage them in a conversation where he'd put on a fake persona and try to draw them into being the butt of a ridiculous conversation without ever knowing quite what was going on. The best example requires a little backstory. Adolf, let's call him that, is a staunch Glenn Beck worshipping conservative. We were traveling in Chicago just after Obama's election in 2008. He struck up a conversation with a black Chicago taxi driver about Obama. Adolf put on the persona of an Obama fan and was going way over the top, saying how Obama was like a messiah that would save our country, etc. The driver didn't exactly take the bait. He had a balanced and thoughtful take on politics. At one point he turned to Adolf and said something like, "Yeah, Obama is my preferred candidate." The problem that I have with the right is that too many of them just listen what their leaders say and never think for themselves. They watch their TV and listen to their radio idols without ever turning on their brain. It was priceless to see the millionaire, educated, big shot get so accurately assessed by comparatively impoverished Chicago taxi driver. I have problems with this. It's a truism. It's an overgeneralization. It's a loaded question. That people are inferior superior in the first place. It's a double standard, calling out the case for women acting this way as somehow different than men. The second two are nitpicky, but the first two are what's important. This is one of those clever little sayings that people come up with to sound witty, but are actually fairly unhelpful. My grandfather always said that the way someone treats wait staff will predict the way he or she treats a spouse. I've found this to be true, with very few exceptions. The boyfriend passed the test. I prefer the quote below that states, "If you want to take the measure of a man, see how he treats someone that can be of no benefit to him." I currently work in an environment where I am a contractor at a naval base. I interact with naval officers every day. It's very easy to tell the ones that despise us apart from the ones that appreciate us. Of course, it could just be envy as I make more money than many of them. It isn't about higher or lower, it is about service. The best masters are the greatest servants, treating those in their employment as gods and goddesses that walk the earth. At least, that is my approach. I am always respectful, polite, and generous with the tips. In restaurants, in other positions, I let those serving me know that I would not be successful without them, and that I will ensure they receive their due share of the spoils. My bossman sees everyone as inferior in the workplace. He even tells us as much at times. According to him, every task project he assigns would only take him 2 minutes and it would be better than anything you could do in 2 hours. Again, he makes it a point for you to know this as he's giving you the assignment project. At any rate, the guy is a straight up sociopath that loves treating his employees like dirt. But once you get him out of the office, you find this very caring family man who is generous to very worthwhile charities, and doesn't even boast about it. His children absolutely adore him. The local community idolizes him. This quote about the true measure of a man is very subjective and can't really be applied to a general populace. No, he's still a sociopath, but he recognizes the behaviors that will be rewarded versus those that will not. Part of the problem with today's business environment is that we reward sociopathic behavior. We call it strong leadership. Yes, this is kind of true. How a man treats his underlings is a rather good measure of a man. However, unfortunately, in our society, being nice to others isn't really a desirable trait for men. Just ask yourself how many buttholes you've seen with beautiful women on their arm. In fact, the opposite is usually true. Men get more power and money by treating others poorly and thinking only of themselves. Who's more likely to be rich? Someone who treats his employees well, or someone who's a slave driver? What do you hear women drooling over more often? He's so nice and polite, or he just sees what he wants and takes it. The latter, by a long shot. It's not even a horse race. It's actually proven that psychopaths are much more likely to have money and power, and, by extension, women, than regular men. Being nice to others comes at a cost. It's altruistic. It doesn't help you. That's why women, as a whole, tend to desire buttholes. Buttholes that are nice to them. So, yes, how a man treats his inferiors is a good measure of a man. Only it's not really the right measure. The one I've always heard and believed is, the true measure of a person is seen in how they treat those less fortunate than themselves. I personally prefer that quote to the arts, but the message is essentially the same. I think that quote probably goes well with this next one. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. Dr. Martin Luther King. I agree with you 200%. Number. It's a measure of some of a man's beliefs, but there's no true measure of a man, even if such a thing could be measured solely by one metric, which I reject. While what it means to be a man is a complicated issue and varies from person to person, this certainly can be a lot of it. A good man should be kind and empathetic and humble, which would apply here. I also think a lot of being a man is realized through woman partnership. I think how a man treats his mate and children and family are a big part of it, too. It's a complicated thing that we should struggle with every day to be the best we can be. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.